"What are you looking for?" I asked calmly. She froze, one hand still inside my drawer, the other clutching a handful of old photographs. The silence between us stretched long enough for me to see the pulse in her neck. "Just some old photos," she said. I watched her eyes, not her words. "I'm Elaine. I'm 58, just back from chemotherapy. The drive home had been slow, my body heavy, my thoughts lighter for once. I'd stopped by the bakery for a loaf of bread and a small apple tart, the kind Daniel used to love as a boy. The house felt still when I came in. The faint hum of the washing machine, the soft tick of the hallway clock, and the smell of lavender cleaner I'd used for years. That rhythm, those little sounds, had become my proof that life still carried on, even in pieces. Warm light spilled across the bedroom carpet. My drawer was open, its key left on the vanity, as if she thought I wouldn't notice. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to hear the creak in the floorboard. "Old photos," I repeated. She nodded quickly, almost too fast. "You could have asked," I said. She smiled the way liars smile, wide and weightless. "Of course I should have. I just thought it was fine." She brushed past me, the faint scent of her perfume following her out. I stood there staring at the drawer, at the half-open jewelry box, at the small empty space where my husband's watch used to rest. The air felt colder in that spot. I closed the drawer and pressed the key in. The click sounded final. My hands trembled more from anger than weakness. The warmth of home cracked into something uncertain. Dinner passed without words. Emma set the table, Daniel scrolled through his phone, and I pretended to eat. My body sat there, but my mind kept circling the open drawer, the missing photo, the look in her eyes when she turned around. When Daniel asked if I needed money for prescriptions, I said I was fine. I didn't want to owe him anything tonight. He placed a folded bill by my plate anyway. I left it there. Around 9, the house dimmed into quiet again. I brewed chamomile tea and checked the front door twice. My phone buzzed, a message from her. "Did you tell my husband?" I stared at the words for a long time. The heat from the mug rose against my face, so it hadn't been about photos at all. My thumb hovered before I typed back. What if I showed him? The dots appeared. She was typing, then vanished. Minutes later, the message was deleted, but I'd already seen the tiny preview at the top of the screen. A blurred photo of me sitting at the kitchen table, head bowed over bank papers I hadn't shown anyone. I didn't know whether she had taken it or found it, but the intent was clear. She'd been digging for more than memories. I walked back to the bedroom and opened the drawer again. The photo frames lined up neatly. Our wedding day, Daniel as a baby, the house before, the renovations. I noticed the faint outline of dust where the jewelry box had been moved. I placed the key back under the folded towels instead of the vanity. The clock in the hall chimed 10. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound fade, thinking about how trust can vanish without a single loud moment, just a drawer left open. When I looked at my phone again, her deleted message still sat in the notification preview, half visible, as if mocking me. She deleted her message, but not before I saw the photo. "Why was my father's picture in your purse?" The words slipped out before I could weigh them. She froze at the kitchen counter, her hand tightening around the strap as though she could hide the truth by holding on. For a moment, the only sound was the slow tick of the wall clock above the stove. It was 8 in the morning. The smell of toast still lingered. Daniel had left for work 10 minutes earlier, kissing my cheek like he always did. Emma smiled at him from across the table, playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. Now, with him gone, that smile vanished. She turned toward me, her tone flat. "I told you yesterday I was looking through some old photos. Maybe it fell in." "It didn't fall," I said. "You took it." Her expression hardened. "He always liked me more than you." Then she walked out, her heels sharp against the tiles, each step cutting through the quiet. I sat down, gripping my teacup until the handle grew warm against my palm. That photo wasn't just paper. It was one of the few things I'd kept of my husband. He'd passed 8 years ago, long before the cancer, but I still felt his voice in small moments, like when the house creaked at night or when the scent of rain drifted through the open window. Losing that picture felt like losing him again. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Carol's name flashed on the screen. "You sound off," she said. "What's happened?" "Nothing, just tired." My voice sounded thin, even to me. Carol didn't buy it. "I know that tone. You keep watch, Elaine. Some people get kind only when there's money in the air." I laughed softly. "There isn't much left to take." Still, her words stuck. I went to the drawer where I kept my emergency envelope, the one Daniel didn't know about, the one that had paid for my medication when insurance delays stretched too long. The envelope felt thinner. I counted once, then again. $50 short. My breath caught. I told myself I must have miscounted last week, but the truth pressed harder. Emma had access to this drawer once, when she offered to tidy the room after my last chemo session. "You shouldn't tire yourself," she'd said. "I'll sort things for you." The memory now stung like betrayal, dressed as kindness. By noon, the sky had turned overcast. I sat by the kitchen window, watching the mail carrier pass. The clock ticked louder, or maybe I was just noticing it for the first time. The rhythm of the seconds made me restless. Each tick reminded me how silence fills the spaces where trust used to be. Daniel called around 1. "Emma said you seemed upset this morning. Everything okay?" "She mentioned that?" I asked. My tone came out too calm. "She worries about you. You should be grateful." I smiled into the phone, though he couldn't see it. "I am," I said. "Tell her thank you." He hesitated. "Do you need money for your prescriptions this week?" "No, Daniel. I'll manage." After he hung up, I whispered to myself, "Always managing." The words tasted bitter. The rest of the day crawled. I kept busy, folded laundry, wiped the counters, balanced the checkbook, but my focus kept circling back to that missing photograph. Why take it? What did she want from a memory she never owned? The question itched like a wound I couldn't reach. Around dusk, I found her purse on the hallway table, unzipped. The corner of the photo peeked out, torn along the edge where my husband's hand had rested on my shoulder. My breath quickened. I didn't touch it, just looked long enough to see that she'd cut her own face from another picture and taped it over mine. The glue line was crooked, the intent cruelly straight. I heard her footsteps upstairs. I zipped the purse shut, walked to my room, and sat on the bed. I felt the weight of exhaustion settle in my chest, heavier than before. I thought of my husband's steady way of managing money, the little envelopes he'd labeled for every expense: rent, savings, medicine. "It's all handled," he used to say. Now it wasn't. When the house fell quiet that night, I checked my phone again. Carol had texted a reminder to lock up and keep receipts. "Secrets spread fastest in silence," she'd written earlier. She was right. Silence lets rot grow. I placed my husband's old pocket watch on the nightstand. The hands glowed faintly in the dark, ticking toward something I couldn't name. Around midnight, my phone vibrated again, an alert from the bank, a withdrawal notice. The account alert came before dawn. "Your card was declined," the pharmacist whispered. Her tone was soft, but carried the weight of something final. I glanced at the machine, blinking red, then at the small bottle of pills sitting between us. The air felt heavier than the smell of antiseptic that lingered behind the counter. "I just used it yesterday," I said, though I already knew that wasn't the point. I handed her another card, the one I rarely used, and prayed it would go through. It did. I signed the receipt, thanked her, and walked out with my medicine in a brown paper bag that crinkled too loudly in the quiet morning air. It was just after 9. The street shimmered from last night's rain. I sat in my car, opened my banking app, and stared at the list of withdrawals, each labeled as house expenses, grocery stores I hadn't visited, utility payments I never made, and a transfer marked with Emma's email. My chest tightened. She had access because I'd asked her to handle things while I was in chemo. It had felt practical at the time. Now it felt like a slow theft disguised as help. By the time I drove home, my hands were shaking. I set the pills on the kitchen counter beside the unpaid electricity bill. The envelope stared back, pale and accusing. I boiled water for tea, watching steam rise, thinking about every time I'd handed Emma cash or receipts with trust instead of caution. The house felt smaller today, like the walls were listening. That evening, Daniel came home, tired and distracted. He tossed his jacket over the chair and opened the mail without looking at me. "How was the doctor?" he asked. "Fine," I said, "except my card didn't work." He looked up briefly, frowning. "Maybe you entered the wrong PIN." "I checked," I said. "Someone's been using the joint account." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Emma handles most of that now. You told her to." "Since when do I need permission to buy my medicine?" The words came out sharper than I meant. He stiffened. "No one's taking anything from you. Don't make this into a fight." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just looked at him, the same son who once used to save his allowance to buy me Mother's Day gifts. Now he defended her without even hearing me. He pushed back his chair and left the room. I listened to the faint creak of their bedroom door closing upstairs. I sat there a while, watching the kitchen clock move past 10. The ticking sounded louder than usual, too close. I picked up the phone and called the bank. The automated voice told me to visit a branch if I suspected fraud. Fraud. The word hit harder than the rejection at the pharmacy. I printed the bank statement before bed. Black ink, pale lies. 3 transactions in her handwriting, her neat loops pretending to be mine. I folded the paper twice, slipped it into the back of my old recipe book, and locked it in the bottom drawer. That drawer had become my only safe place. Before I turned off the light, I touched the pill bottle on my nightstand. The label caught the glow from the lamp, the name of the drug too long to pronounce but essential to keep me alive. I thought about how money and mercy had somehow tangled together in this house. Every dollar now felt like a test of loyalty. Around midnight, I lay awake, counting the ceiling's faint shadows. My mind ran through years of small kindnesses, each one now suspicious. How easily trust can become a weapon. I thought about the cashier's pitying eyes, Daniel's careless shrug, Emma's soft voice saying, "I'll take care of it." I'd believed her then. Now I knew better. In the morning, I would go to the bank myself. I would look them in the eye and tell them the account holder was not confused, not old, not sick, just tired of being stolen from. Tomorrow, the bank will hear my voice. "Mrs. Warren, your son authorized joint access." The bank manager's voice was polite, practiced, and cold. I felt my grip tighten on the phone. "That can't be right," I said. "I never gave permission." He paused, and the faint hum of office air filled the silence. "I understand this must be upsetting, ma'am, but we have an authorization on file, recorded and signed. Would you like to hear the playback?" My throat went dry. "Play it." A few seconds later, my son's voice filled my ear. Calm, steady, certain. "Yes, I'm confirming that Emma can handle my mother's account while she's recovering. It's for her convenience." For her convenience. My own son had said that. The sound of his voice, gentle, almost protective, cut deeper than the lie itself. I didn't speak until the recording ended. "That's impossible," I managed. "He must have misunderstood something." "I'll make a note of your concern," the manager said softly. "We'll review it internally and get back to you within a few days. In the meantime, I've frozen any new transfers from the account. You still have access to withdraw small amounts directly." He was kind enough, but I could hear the quiet judgment under his professionalism, like he'd handled too many confused clients before. "We appreciate your patience," he added. After the call, I sat there holding the phone, staring at the table. The afternoon sun stretched across the envelope of unpaid bills beside me. The edges curled slightly in the warmth, as if even paper was tired of waiting for resolution. By 6, Daniel came home. His voice echoed from the hallway. "Mom, you called the bank?" "I had to," I said. "They played your voice for me. You gave her joint access." He frowned, setting down his briefcase. "Yes, Emma said it would help with your medications, utilities, everything." "I never asked for that," I said quietly. He sighed. "You've been through a lot. Maybe you just forgot." The words struck harder than a shout. "I didn't forget." "Mom," he said, soft but condescending, "you're exhausted. Let us handle things for a while." I said no. His jaw tightened. "Emma's only trying to help. Don't make her feel like she's done something wrong." I looked at him, really looked. My son, standing there defending her lies like truth. "You think I'm losing my mind?" He didn't answer. That silence was confirmation enough. He picked up his briefcase and turned toward the stairs. "I'll make dinner," I said, but the words were empty. He hesitated, then walked back, leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Just rest, Mom," he said gently. I felt that kiss like an apology I wasn't meant to hear. It lingered, faint and heavy, as he walked away. After he left, I wrote everything down: the time of the call, the manager's name, the phrases he used, even the tone of Daniel's voice in the recording. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into an envelope. The pen left a faint groove across the table, like a mark I couldn't erase. That night, I sat by the kitchen window, watching the streetlights flicker on. The house felt different now, not unsafe exactly, but hollow, like someone had reached in and moved the walls an inch farther apart. I poured tea I didn't drink. The bank had promised to look into it, but I already knew what that meant: delay, paperwork, doubt. So I made my own promise, to stop trusting anyone's version of help but my own. I closed the notebook, sealed the envelope, and placed it beside the phone. My hands were steady again. He kissed my forehead like I was already fading. "The key doesn't fit anymore." I said it out loud, as if the words might change something. The metal turned in my hand, rough against my fingers, refusing to catch. Rain gathered at the edge of the porch roof, dropping in steady rhythm onto the welcome mat that suddenly didn't feel meant for me. I tried again. Same result. The door didn't budge. Through the window, I saw movement. Emma, crossing the hallway with a towel in her hands. She froze when she noticed me outside. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she opened the window just enough to speak. "Daniel changed the locks," she said softly. "Just till you're stronger." Her tone was light, but her eyes dared me to argue. "You mean until I stop asking questions?" I said. She didn't answer. She just gave a small shrug and shut the window. The sound of the latch sliding into place was louder than the rain. I stood there for a moment, staring at my own reflection in the glass. An older woman, thin from chemo, holding a useless key. The porch light flickered, catching the water on my raincoat. Behind that door was everything I had built. Photo albums, bills, my husband's watch, and the smell of the home I had scrubbed clean for 30 years. I knocked once, then again. No response. A neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, came out holding an umbrella. "Elaine, are you locked out?" "Seems like it." I tried to sound calm, though my chest burned. She frowned. "I'll call someone. You shouldn't be out in this weather." Minutes later, a patrol car stopped at the curb. The officer approached, polite but detached. "Everything all right, ma'am?" "My son and daughter-in-law changed the locks while I was out," I said. "This is my house." He looked toward the windows where the curtains had been drawn tight. "Is your name on the deed?" "Yes," I said quickly. "Every document in that house has my name on it." He hesitated, radio crackling on his shoulder. "I can make a report, but it's technically a civil matter. Family property disputes usually need a lawyer." "So you can't open my door," I said flatly. He shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I'll log the visit." I watched him jot notes on a damp pad of paper. The rain had darkened his uniform at the shoulders. When he left, I stood there with my neighbor's umbrella above me and a hollow ache spreading in my chest. Mrs. Caldwell touched my arm gently. "Come stay with me tonight. You shouldn't be alone." "I'll be fine," I said. but she didn't listen. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on her couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender detergent. My shoes left wet marks on the rug. She made tea and set it on the table between us. "I heard some arguing last week," she said carefully. "Are you sure you're safe there?" "I was," I replied. "Until today." The clock on her wall ticked past 9. I stared at my phone, the empty home screen reflecting the glow of her lamp. No message from Daniel, not even a question about where I was. When the rain eased, I stood by her window, looking out at my own house across the street. The lights inside were still on. My bedroom curtain moved slightly, as if someone had brushed past it. I wanted to tell myself it was the wind, but deep down, I knew she was walking through my room, touching my things, replacing me one drawer at a time. I thought of the savings account I'd built for repairs, the one she now controlled. Of the medical payments still due. Of the promises I'd made to stay patient, stay trusting, stay quiet. Those promises had just drowned in the rain outside my own door. Mrs. Caldwell returned with a folded towel and a small phone. "Here," she said, "my spare. Use it for anything private." I took it, feeling the weight of that small device like a lifeline. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled. "Start recording everything. People show who they are when they think no one's watching." I nodded, looking out the window one last time. My home glowed warm under the porch light, but I stood in the dark. Carol handed me a spare phone. "Start recording everything. Every lie leaves ink." I whispered it while feeding the first page into the scanner. The machine whirred softly, steady, mechanical, unlike my pulse. Carol's cousin, Megan, sat across the table at her office, tapping a pen against a mug that said, "Legal doesn't mean cold." She smiled gently. "Don't worry, we'll make clean copies of everything." The room smelled faintly of paper and toner. The sound of pages sliding beneath glass filled the silence. I watched the light pass beneath each sheet, the glow tracing across, the forged loops of my name. My signature looked wrong, too smooth, too confident. Mine always dipped slightly on the second E. Whoever had faked it had practiced, but not enough. "There," Megan said. "That's 3 checks, all signed over the same week." I leaned closer. "I didn't authorize any of these." She nodded. "We can already tell they were scanned from another document. See the identical pressure marks? That's a copy-paste job, not handwriting." Her tone was calm, almost routine, but to me, it felt like a hammer blow. "What happens now?" "If the bank verifies these as forgeries, it's a criminal offense. Fraud, possibly embezzlement." The word fraud settled over me like dust. For a second, I just stared at the papers, wondering how my life had shrunk to signatures and account numbers. Then the other realization struck. Daniel knew. He had to. These checks came from the same joint account he defended so easily. Megan printed another set. "Keep these copies somewhere safe. I'll have Mr. Blake, the attorney, look them over tonight. He might suggest filing an initial complaint." I nodded, though my stomach twisted. "Do I need to tell my son?" "Not yet," she said gently. "Right now, the fewer people who know, the better." When I left the office, the late afternoon light caught the dust in the air, tiny flecks turning golden for a moment before fading. I held the folder tight under my arm like it might blow away if I loosened my grip. That evening, I sat at Carol's kitchen table, spreading the documents across the wood. 3 checks, I said, all signed in my name. Carol looked stunned. He let her do this? I think he helped her. She leaned forward. "Elaine, this isn't just money anymore. This is control." I nodded slowly. "I know." Later, I opened my notebook, the one with my husband's handwriting still on the first page, listing every monthly expense from years ago. I wrote down the dates of each check, the amounts, and beside them, I wrote what I sold that week. 1 gold bracelet, sold for $220. The money covered my treatment copay, but the loss stung deeper than the transaction. That bracelet had been my anniversary gift from him 20 years ago. I ran my thumb over the empty spot on my wrist. It felt strange, lighter than I expected. Not relief, just space where something honest used to be. Around 9, I called the lawyer. His voice was calm, professional. "I've reviewed the documents," he said. "There's clear evidence of forgery. We'll file a preliminary complaint with the district office first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to list both names?" "Yes," I said. "Both." He paused. "That might escalate it faster." "Good." After hanging up, I went to the window. The house across the street was dark, except for the kitchen light. I could see Emma moving around, humming while she washed dishes in the home that should have been mine. The sight didn't hurt like before. It clarified. Every lie they'd told, every signature they'd stolen, now had weight on paper, and paper could be proof. I gathered the copies, slipped them into a plain folder, and tucked it beneath my jacket. Each sheet felt like armor, thin but real. When I finally sat on the couch, the fatigue caught up with me. My hands trembled, not from illness, but from certainty. The system might move slowly, but I was no longer silent. I thought about how easily trust turns to debt, how quickly love becomes paperwork. The printer's light still flickered faintly in my mind, sliding across each lie in perfect mechanical rhythm. Then the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. A man's voice said, "Mrs. Warren, this is the notary's office. Someone's contesting your complaint." My heart sank. "Who?" He didn't answer right away. I already knew. "The notary called. Someone's contesting your complaint." "She's unstable," that's what he said. Carol's voice trembled when she repeated it. We stood just outside the church hall, the faint hum of Sunday chatter spilling from inside. I froze, one hand tightening around my purse. "Who said that?" I asked. She hesitated. "Daniel. He told Mrs. Green you've been confused lately, said the medication's been making you forget things." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I looked through the open doorway at the rows of people, neighbors, choir members, the same faces that had prayed beside me through chemo. Now they avoided my eyes, their smiles quick and polite. When I finally walked inside, the whispers followed. A woman touched my arm, her pity disguised as kindness. "You look tired, dear. Are you still coping?" "I'm managing," I said. "Why do you ask?" She blinked, caught off guard, and murmured something about concern. At the front pew, Emma sat with Daniel, her hand resting gently on his. She looked back once, expression soft and measured. The perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect lie. During the sermon, I barely heard the words. The pastor spoke about forgiveness and family, his voice warm but distant. I watched Emma slip a folded bulletin into her handbag and glance at her phone. Her thumb moved quickly, tapping, scrolling. After the service, Carol pulled me aside. "You need to see this." She handed me her phone. The screen showed a thread of messages, my number at the top. "Stay out of my house," one read. "You'll regret crossing me," said another. I stared, unable to breathe. "That's not me." "I know," Carol whispered, "but she's showing them to people, saying you've been sending threats." My heart pounded. "She sent these to herself," I said quietly. "Copied my number. It's all staged." Carol nodded. "Then prove it. Don't let her control the story." We walked outside together. The sunlight hit the church steps, sharp and cold. I felt every glance burning the back of my neck. "Let them talk," I said, more to myself than her. Truth doesn't need volume, it needs evidence. That afternoon, I called the lawyer. "She's using fake texts," I said. He sighed. "Do you have screenshots?" "Yes, I'll forward them now." "Good," he said. "We'll compare metadata. Lies leave trails, especially digital ones." I hung up and sat at Carol's table, scrolling through the proof. The phone screen reflected my face, older, harder, but awake. By 5 o'clock, the church gossip had already reached my doctor's office. The receptionist called, awkwardly polite. "We heard you might be struggling with clarity, Mrs. Warren. Should we adjust your prescription?" I thanked her, ended the call, and pressed the phone to my chest. That's when the weight of it hit. Emma hadn't just stolen my money. She was trying to steal my sanity in everyone else's eyes. Carol returned from the kitchen, holding tea. "You'll have to fight this in daylight," she said. "They're counting on you to hide." "I won't," I said. "They made it public. I'll make the truth public, too." She smiled sadly. "That's the spirit I remember." The rest of the evening blurred into quiet determination. I printed each screenshot, labeling them by date, circling the inconsistencies, the unnatural spacing, the missing timestamps. Every detail mattered now. When night fell, I walked outside, the church bell tolling faintly across the street. I thought of how quickly faith turns into gossip, how softly cruelty hides behind concern. I checked my phone once more. No message from Daniel, no apology, no denial, just silence, which hurt more than any accusation. The pastor's words replayed in my head. "Perhaps rest will help." I almost laughed. Rest had become a luxury for people who didn't have to defend their own minds. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be different. I would speak under oath if I had to. I would make the lies visible. Tomorrow, the lawyer wants me to record a statement. "Say your full name for the record." The words came from somewhere behind the small black recorder on the table. I stared at the red light blinking steadily, waiting. My throat felt dry, but my voice didn't shake. "Elaine Warren," I said, age 56. The air in the lawyer's office was heavy, a mix of dust and burnt coffee. The blinds filtered the morning sun into sharp, narrow lines across the desk. Each strip of light cut through the pile of papers stacked beside me. Statements, signatures, photocopies, all leading here. "Let's begin with the day access to your bank account was removed," the lawyer said gently. I took a slow breath. "It was 3 weeks ago. I tried to pay a hospital invoice, but the transaction failed. When I called the bank, they told me I was no longer listed as the primary account holder." "And who changed that?" "My son," I said, "with his wife's help." The recorder captured the quiet that followed, its small red eye still blinking. "Continue," he said. I described everything, how the locks were changed, how the bills stopped getting paid, how every decision about my own home was being made behind my back. As I spoke, I could hear my own voice tightening, the tremor leaving one word at a time. I didn't realize until later that they'd transferred funds labeled as renovation projects. There were no renovations, just withdrawals, quiet ones. The lawyer nodded slowly. "Do you have documentation?" I slid a folder across the desk. 3 checks, my name forged. He examined them without speaking. When he finally looked up, there was something almost like pride in his eyes. "This is solid evidence. You've done the hardest part, proving what everyone else tried to call delusion." I exhaled. I was starting to believe them. He leaned forward. "That's what they wanted. They built their defense on your silence." The sound of the recorder hummed softly between us. I didn't know if it was the machine or my own heart syncing with it, but every click and pause felt like punctuation to my story. "Tell us about the messages," he said. "The ones you mentioned earlier." I nodded. "They sent fake texts to themselves, from my number, told people I was threatening them." The pastor believed it. "The neighbors did too, but I've printed the originals. I've even saved call logs showing their edits." He wrote a quick note on his pad. "Excellent. We'll request metadata verification." "Will that clear my name publicly?" I asked. He gave a faint smile. "It will start to." For the first time in months, I felt like my words were being built into something that could stand on its own. A record. Proof that I wasn't mad, just betrayed. He clicked the recorder off for a moment. "Would you like a break?" "No," I said. "If I stop, I might not start again." He switched it back on. "Then let's finish this in one sitting." The rest came out like confession. How I sold jewelry to pay medical fees, how they promised to manage everything, how I had trusted every word. My hands trembled, but I didn't hide them. The tremor made each truth look alive. When I reached the end, he said softly, "Final statement." I looked at the recorder, its light steady again. They took my name off the account, but today I put my name back into the record. He clicked stop. The silence afterward was sharp but clean. I leaned back, feeling drained but solid. "You did well," he said. "Very well." Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. The city hummed around me, horns, footsteps, the faint buzz of wires above. Every sound seemed clearer, like the world itself was listening. My phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "Why are you doing this?" I stared at it for a long second, then typed back, "Because you already did." I slipped the phone into my pocket and started walking. When I reached the corner, the lawyer caught up with me. His tone was calm, but his words carried something like warning. "You've shifted the balance," he said. "They'll panic next." She came with flowers, not remorse. That's the first thing I noticed when I saw her through the glass. Emma, standing on my doorstep, holding a bouquet of lilies, as if grief could be gift-wrapped. I didn't open the door fully, just enough for her to see my face and hear my voice. "What do you want?" She smiled the way liars do, soft around the eyes, practiced at the edges. "I came to talk," she said. "To make peace." Behind me, Carol's spare phone was propped on the shelf, its small red light recording. I kept my voice even. "You can say what you need from there." Emma looked down at the flowers. "They're for you." Lilies were his favorite. I thought it was time to start over. The smell hit me first. Sweet, heavy, too clean for honesty. "You're late for that," I said. Her tone changed slightly, a silk turning into thread. "Daniel's been worried about you. You've been confused lately. He wants to make sure things are handled before next week's hearing." "Handled?" I repeated. "Like you handled my house, my account?" Her eyes flicked past me toward the hallway, searching. "We only took what was necessary. Renovations, repairs. You know how expenses pile up." I stepped forward, blocking her view. "You mean forgery and theft?" Her smile tightened. "You shouldn't throw words like that around. They could hurt your case." "I have everything on record," I said quietly. "Every transfer, every lie." For a moment she didn't speak. The wind rustled the bouquet, scattering a few petals across the doorstep mat. The sight of them falling made her flinch. Then came the real voice, cold, clipped, no more pretending. "You'll regret this." The air seemed to freeze between us. "Is that another threat?" I asked. She took a step back. "It's advice." I closed the door halfway and waited until I heard her footsteps retreat down the path. Through the narrow crack, I saw her toss the bouquet to the ground. The lilies landed face down in the dirt. Carol came from the kitchen whispering, "Did you get—" I nodded. Every word. We replayed the video on the phone. The camera caught everything. Her fake smile, her tone shift, the way her eyes darted toward the papers on my table. The audio was sharp, clear enough that the tremor in her final line felt personal, even on playback. "She's panicking," Carol said. "Good," I answered. "Let her hear what she sounds like." That evening, I forwarded the file to my lawyer. His reply came within minutes. "Perfect evidence. This locks intent." I stared at that message longer than I should have. For weeks, I'd been collecting fragments, signatures, receipts, text threads. But this was different. This wasn't paper proof. This was her voice, alive and cornered. By nightfall, rain began tapping against the window. I looked out and saw the bouquet still lying there, soaked and bruised. The lilies had started to brown at the edges, their white petals curling in on themselves. Carol watched from behind me. "Leave them," she said. "Let them rot." I almost laughed. That's the plan. Later, around 9, Daniel texted again. "Can't we settle this privately?" I typed back, "The time for private is over." The message stayed unread. I sat near the window until the streetlights came on, faint halos glowing through the rain. The house felt both smaller and stronger, 4 walls I'd earned back inch by inch. I thought about how many years I'd spent keeping peace, smoothing things over, swallowing hurt so the family could stay whole. That peace had cost me everything, money, trust, even my home. But now I had a recording, proof that silence wasn't the same as dignity. When the rain eased, I stepped outside. The lilies were flattened against the mat, water pooling around their stems. Their scent had changed. What was once gentle, now sharp and bitter. I left them there as evidence of something that couldn't be faked anymore. Tomorrow's hearing decides who owns my life. All rise. The sound hit harder than expected, like a door slamming on everything that came before. I stood slowly, clutching the edge of the table to keep my balance. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and stale coffee, a mix of order and exhaustion. Daniel and Emma sat across the aisle, dressed in quiet neutrality, him in gray, her in pale blue. They didn't look at me, not once. The judge entered, his robe brushing the edge of the bench. "Be seated." The shuffle of chairs echoed through the room like a single breath drawn and held. My lawyer leaned closer. "Stay calm. Let the evidence speak." He called me first. I walked to the stand, feeling every step in my knees. When the clerk swore me in, my voice didn't waver. "I do." "Tell the court what happened," my lawyer said. I began from the beginning, how I lost access to my bank account, how the locks were changed, how the checks appeared with my name written in someone else's hand. The clerk organized the exhibits as I spoke: photocopies, screenshots, receipts. The rustle of paper filled the gaps between my words. Across the room, Daniel's lawyer interrupted. "Mrs. Warren, is it true you were undergoing chemotherapy at the time?" "Yes." "And would you say your memory or judgment might have been compromised?" I looked at him, then at the judge. My body was weak. My mind was clear. That's why I noticed the lies. A low murmur rippled through the benches. The judge raised his hand for silence. "Continue," my lawyer said. I described the forged checks, 3 of them, each signed in my name, the loops wrong, the spacing too deliberate. He projected them onto a small monitor for the judge. My signature sat beside the fake one, truth next to imitation. The judge leaned forward. "Both signatures were notarized?" "Yes, Your Honor," the clerk replied. "The notary has since withdrawn certification." The defense lawyer tried again. "Perhaps this was a misunderstanding. Family matters often blur lines of consent." I spoke before my lawyer could stop me. "Consent isn't silent. It isn't assumed. They took my name and used it to steal." Daniel shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on the table. Emma crossed her legs, pretending calm, but her fingers twisted the edge of her sleeve. Then the clerk read aloud. "Total amount transferred, $10,462 across 4 transactions labeled renovations and medical coordination." The number landed like a stone in water. No sound at first, then a wave through the room. The stillness afterward felt heavier than any noise. My lawyer held up the bank statement. "None of that money went to renovations or treatment. In fact, we have receipts showing jewelry purchases, vacation expenses, and a vehicle payment under their names." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Do you have proof of authorization?" Daniel's lawyer hesitated. "There were verbal agreements, no written confirmation." "That will suffice," the judge said dryly. "Or rather, it will not." A thin line of satisfaction cut through my fear. For months, I had been called unstable, confused, bitter. Now the record itself was answering back. The defense shifted tactics. Emma took the stand next. Her tone was polished, almost tearful. "We only wanted to help her manage things. She was tired, overwhelmed. We didn't mean harm." My lawyer rose. "Then why did you change her locks?" Emma blinked. "For safety." "Whose safety?" She didn't answer. He slid a document across the table. "Doorbell video, dated 1 week after the financial transfer. It shows you threatening her. Is that also for safety?" Emma's mouth opened, but no sound came. Daniel looked at her, jaw tight. The room seemed to contract around their silence. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "Enough!" I stared at my bracelet. Well, the space where it used to be. I remembered selling it to pay for treatment, thinking it was the lowest point of my life. It wasn't. This was lower, but steadier too. I had lost nearly everything tangible. What was left was truth, and it was finally standing upright. When my lawyer finished his closing remarks, the judge leaned back. "I will review all submitted evidence tonight," he said. "Verdict tomorrow morning." The words hung in the air like an unfinished sentence. As we stood to leave, I looked once more across the aisle. Emma's hands were clasped tight in her lap. Daniel wouldn't meet her eyes. The gavel struck once more, echoing like the end of a storm. The judge paused. "Verdict tomorrow morning. The court finds in favor of Mrs. Warren." For a moment, I couldn't tell if I'd actually heard it or if my mind had filled the silence for mercy's sake. The words sounded ordinary, legal, almost casual, but they broke something open inside me. My hands gripped the edge of the table, fingertips against cool varnish. Daniel exhaled hard. Emma's jaw locked, her eyes darting toward him, then back to the judge. She wanted to object, to claw the air, but she couldn't. The judgment was final. The clerk slid a single sheet across the bench. The paper felt heavier than it looked. The seal shimmered faintly as the judge signed his name, pen gliding with slow precision. "Assets are to be frozen effective immediately," he said. "Property restored, restitution enforced." The gavel came down once, sharp and clear. That sound stayed with me longer than any apology ever had. Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. I pressed my palm against the ruling, its surface rough where the embossed seal raised the paper. I'd touched hospital walls, eviction notices, even the cold iron of a mailbox lock I no longer owned. But this texture, this final proof, felt different. Carol was waiting near the exit. She looked at me as if confirming that I was still standing. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "We did." She hugged me, and for the first time in a long while, my shoulders didn't resist. When we stepped outside, a reporter called out, "Mrs. Warren, any comment on today's decision?" I paused. It wasn't about money. It was about my name. They scribbled it down like a quote, but it wasn't meant for print. It was just truth, spoken aloud so I could believe it myself. Emma brushed past me with her lawyer, voice low and trembling. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Regret had been my companion for too long already. The air felt different, thinner, cleaner. The sun hit the courthouse steps, pale and steady. For months, everything in my world had smelled of worry and stale medication. Now, for the first time, the air carried nothing but space. That afternoon, Carol and I stopped by her car to sign a few final forms. She smiled at the mention of her daughter's scholarship. I told her the truth, that the small gold bracelet I once sold for rent money had found its way back, just not in the form I expected. "It paid for someone's future," I said. "That's better than sitting in a drawer." She laughed softly. "You sound lighter." "I am," I admitted. "Justice isn't joy. It's just the weight shifting." She drove me home, the city moving past like pages turning. By the time we reached my street, the day had changed color. I unlocked the door, the same one Emma had once tried to force open, and stepped inside. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was earned. I looked around at the restored order, the photos back on the wall, the drawer no longer tampered with, the faint ring of the old clock echoing somewhere down the hall. For months, I had lived like a ghost in my own house, fighting shadows. Now, even the light on the kitchen counter looked honest. I placed the court document inside the drawer and closed it gently. The wood felt solid again, real again. The phone buzzed once, a notification from a news article. Local widow wins case against family fraud. Widow. Fraud. 2 words that once defined me. Now they were headlines, detached from who I was. I turned the phone face down and whispered, "Let them have their version." The real story wasn't the case. It was survival. It was learning that truth doesn't shout. It stands. When I looked through the window, the neighborhood seemed unchanged. Same lawns, same cars, same quiet rhythm. But somewhere, beneath it all, I knew the balance had shifted. People would talk, wonder, compare notes, and that was enough, because truth spreads faster than any ruling. Local widow wins fraud case against own family. That's what the paper said, printed in bold black letters that looked louder than any voice I'd raised all year. My name, the same one they once dragged through rumor and pity, now sat at the top of the page like it had survived something. The morning light came through the curtains and hit the paper on the kitchen table. For once, I didn't flinch at brightness. I traced the headline with my finger. It didn't feel like victory, just proof that the world had finally caught up to what I already knew. By noon, the neighborhood had read it. Some stared, some waved too quickly, pretending kindness had always been there. A few crossed the street rather than face me at all. I went out to the porch to breathe. The air was cool, and for the first time in months, I could smell the lavender from the garden again. It had come back, stubborn and soft, the way truth always does. Carol showed up carrying 2 coffees. "You made the front page," she said, grinning. "Apparently," I replied. "Right next to an ad for roofing repairs. Fitting, I suppose." She laughed. "How does it feel?" "Strange. Like justice has a smaller sound than I thought." She nodded. "Quiet doesn't mean weak." I handed her the article. "They quoted me," I said. "Healing isn't revenge, it's repair." She smiled. "You actually said that?" "I did. Didn't expect it to end up in print." A car slowed outside. 2 women I used to see at church rolled down their window. "We're so sorry, dear," one called out. "We had no idea what you were going through." I wanted to ask how they missed it when it was happening, but I just said, "Thank you." They drove off before the silence could answer for them. By mid-afternoon, messages began to arrive. Old friends, cousins, even strangers. One wrote, "Your story gave me courage to stand up for myself." Another sent a small donation for cancer recovery. I hadn't asked for help, but reading those notes made my throat tighten anyway. Emma's social circle vanished overnight. The same people who used to admire her perfect hosting now whispered about betrayal and greed. Someone online shared the court statement, and within hours her photo circulated with captions she couldn't control. Daniel resigned from his job quietly. No one forced him out, but guilt works faster than any notice. He sent a single text that evening, "I hope you find peace." I didn't reply. Some messages don't deserve to be answered right away. I walked through the house, noticing details I hadn't in months. The neat drawer I'd once found ransacked, the faint marks on the wall where my old clock used to hang. I didn't replace it. I didn't need constant reminders of time lost. I was busy reclaiming what was left. The dining room looked smaller now that tension wasn't taking up space. The chairs felt lighter. Even the quiet seemed honest again. On the counter sat the framed photo that used to make me ache. The family of 3 at a holiday table, smiling before the fractures began. I didn't hide it this time. I just looked at it and whispered, "We were something once." Then I turned it face down, not in anger, but release. Carol broke the silence. "People will keep talking," she said. "Let them," I answered. "Every story they tell gets me further from theirs." She nodded, then reached for my hand. "You know," she said, "that drawer you hated looking at, it's finally empty." I glanced toward it. "Empty," I repeated, "but clean." When evening came, the lavender scent drifted in again, mixed with the faint ink smell from the newspaper still on the table. I left it open, headline up. I wanted it to fade naturally, the way wounds do when they're finally done bleeding. I poured tea and sat by the window. Across the street, a camera flash went off. Some reporter taking one last shot of the woman who wouldn't stay quiet. I smiled faintly. Let them have their picture. The real story was already told. The phone buzzed beside me. One new notification. Unknown number. I didn't open it. Still, one message waited unread. "I'm sorry, Mom." The words glowed on my phone screen like a wound reopened. Just 3 of them, sent at 11:42 p.m. No greeting, No explanation. I read them twice before my mind even accepted they were real. For months, silence had been my son's language. Now, in the quiet of that late hour, his voice had found me again, through pixels, not presence. The house was dark except for the faint light spilling from the window. It traced the edges of the table, catching on the framed court document still resting there. I hadn't moved it since the verdict. Maybe part of me didn't trust the peace yet. I sat down slowly, phone in hand. My thumb hovered over the screen, but no words came. My chest tightened, not from anger this time, but from something smaller, more fragile, grief disguised as relief. I scrolled up through the old messages, weeks of unanswered texts from me, reminders, questions, the last one reading, "I still believe in you, even if I shouldn't." That had been sent the night before the hearing. He never replied. Until now. I whispered to no one, "You took your time." The sound of my own voice startled me. I read the message again, slower this time. "I'm sorry, Mom." No punctuation, no signature, just the rawness of guilt pressing against the screen. I wanted to hate him for how easy it was, for how those words made my heart move despite everything he'd done. Emma had manipulated him, yes, but he still chose silence when I needed truth. He still stood by while they changed my locks, while they emptied my accounts, while they watched me shrink under the weight of humiliation. And yet, he said sorry. I stood up and walked toward the window. The street outside was empty, the faint orange glow from the street lamp painting long shadows on the floor. Somewhere in that stillness, I remembered when he was 10, calling from the hallway, "Mom, can I sleep in your room tonight? It's too quiet." He had always been afraid of silence. Maybe that's why he broke it now. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Emma's gone. I'm staying at a friend's for now. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how." I swallowed hard. So it was over. The perfect marriage that destroyed us both had finally collapsed under its own lies. "She said you'd never forgive me. She said you'd hate me forever." I typed 3 words and deleted them, then typed 4 more. None felt right. Forgiveness isn't something you text. It's something you live with, or don't. I left the phone face down on the table. My hands trembled as I reached for the glass of water nearby. It tasted metallic, like memory. At 2 a.m., I picked up the phone again. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I couldn't look away. I thought about all the nights I'd prayed for this. An apology, a sign, anything that meant he still saw me as his mother, not a problem to be erased. And now that it was here, I didn't know what to do with it. By 3:30, I had made tea and watched the sky shift from black to deep blue. The first hint of dawn began to press against the window pane. The lavender plant outside looked alive again, droplets of dew glinting like tiny apologies waiting to be accepted. I finally typed a reply, just 3 words. "I'm still here." I stared at them before hitting send. The words didn't promise forgiveness. They didn't erase what he'd done, but they said what mattered, that I hadn't disappeared, that the door wasn't closed forever. The message sent. A soft chime echoed in the still room, and for once, it didn't sound hollow. I stood by the window as the morning light crept in, softening everything it touched. The walls, the table, even the court papers. The house felt different, almost like it had taken a breath after holding it too long. The truth was, I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, I didn't dread tomorrow. Tomorrow, I start living again. I opened the drawer one last time. It had been almost 6 months since the trial, since the apology, since everything that used to define my life cracked and quietly rearranged itself. The room smelled faintly of lavender again, the scent I'd once associated with calm, then with loss, and now with something like balance. The drawer was no longer a place of secrets. Its edges had been repaired, the handle replaced. Inside, I'd kept only what mattered, a few letters from friends who never left, a photograph of a garden from years ago, and the small silver key Carol insisted I keep. The key lay at the center, warm from my fingers, a reminder that safety wasn't about locks, it was about boundaries. I leaned back and listened to the house. It sounded alive again. The clock ticked in the hallway. The washing machine hummed softly from the kitchen. These small domestic noises, once unbearable, had become proof that I was still part of something ordinary. For months I'd feared the quiet. Now it was my favorite sound. I took one of the old letters from the drawer and unfolded it. It was from a neighbor who'd written after the newspaper story broke. "You made us think," she'd said. "You made us careful." I'd kept it not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me that even small courage can echo. Lavender sachet I'd tucked in earlier released a faint sweetness when I moved the papers. It wasn't overpowering, just present, like peace that doesn't demand to be noticed. Carol still checked on me every few days. Her voice on the phone always started with, "Are you keeping busy?" And I was. I'd joined a hospital support group, nothing formal, just people who'd lost trust and were learning to rebuild it. I helped them fill out forms, organize medication lists, call insurance offices. "I'm not fixing lives," I told the coordinator once. "I'm just reminding people they still have one." She smiled and said, "That's fixing more than you think." Sometimes I'd walk past the courthouse on my way home, not to relive anything, but to remind myself of what I'd survived. The building always looked the same, cold stone, clean lines, but to me, it no longer represented fear. It was just a place where truth had been written down and made official. In the evenings, I'd brew tea and sit by the same window where I'd once stared into nothing. The world outside had kept moving. New families moved into the neighborhood, kids rode bikes down the street, the same mail carrier waved every morning. Life didn't pause to make room for pain. It just expected you to keep up when you were ready. I was ready now. Daniel hadn't visited yet, but his messages came often. Short, careful, respectful. I didn't rush the healing between us. Some things grow back slowly, like trust learning how to breathe again. Emma, as far as I knew, had left town. People mentioned her name less and less, until eventually it was just another echo of a story that no longer belonged to me. I glanced at the lavender sachet again. Its color had faded slightly, pale but steady. I realized that's what recovery looks like, faded in places, but steady enough to stay. I picked up the spare key from the drawer and turned it in my hand. Carol had pressed it into my palm months ago, saying, "Just in case." At the time, I didn't believe I'd need it. But now I understood. It wasn't about emergencies. It was about permission. Permission to leave, return, begin again. The room caught a slant of evening light, warm and forgiving. I looked around. Same walls, same furniture, but it no longer felt like the scene of betrayal. It felt like home again. I slid the letters back neatly, set the lavender on top, and placed the key beside it. Then I closed the drawer slowly, letting the sound of the wood meeting wood settle into the silence. I whispered the same words that once started all of this, only now they meant something else entirely. "What are you looking for?" This time, the answer wasn't fear. This time, the key fits. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.